think, I think the majority of the time I was confusing what a sale was with an order.
Mm,
I think the reality was things got so teed up for me through a strong referral, someone quitting one company and starting another company, and I would, just be there to be able to take on more business.
all right, welcome back to another episode of the BMK Vision podcast. Gary, we're going to talk about sales today, and I come to you with a little bit of frustration at myself and just kind of the clients as a whole. And I'm frustrated on their behalf. I'm not mad at them, I'm just frustrated on their behalf. But let me see if I can tee this up well. So in fact, just moments ago, you and I were talking about marketing and sales in our own business, right?
Mhm.
And, we in that conversation, you and I spent a lot of time talking about, what best ways to get leads, get appointments, and, everyone's solving that riddle their whole life. What you and I didn't talk about in that call, and what we don't usually talk about is the actual sale, the actual moment of you've got a good prospect on the phone or on the line, and you're going to meet with them and you're going to eventually, hopefully propose something to them and close a deal. You and I don't spend a lot of time talking about that, do we?
No, unfortunately, but we should. But no, we don't.
Well, said another way, you might just say, no, Josh, because you're awesome at that. Why would I ever need to talk to you about that? Okay. Probably not the case, but
I would say that's more likely the case.
maybe the case. So when I think about my critique of our industry and the sales training that's been available for years, I usually critique the fact that these sales trainers just want to talk about that moment, what it looks like
Uh,
to close the deal, or what fancy objection handling do you do. And I was very critical of that, thinking, hey, that's the easy stuff. Why don't you talk to them about what cold calling looks like? Why don't you talk to them about what it looks like to make a stranger a friend who actually pays you money? That was always my critique. Why aren't you top of funnel talking about that? Because that's where most activity happens. When I'm kind of frustrated with myself is I had this big revelation the other day talking to a client, and they were telling me about how they're handling some internal sales to clients, existing clients, and how they're handling opportunities that land their way. And they're great guys and they're smart. And I gave them a lot of credit. Like, that's easy for you. Once they talked me through what they're doing, under a different context, I would have thought they were doing like a Saturday Night Live skit.
really?
Are you telling me that that's really what you do? Like, I had to reiterate it without also condescending. It was just like, that can't be what you actually do. So the frustration is on my part for myself is like, man, that's a bigger blind spot than I realized. I still think all those other sales trainers are full of it and they just talk about the easy stuff. But I think there's something to us needing to address some of the fundamentals of selling and what that looks like when that thing is right in front of you. No matter how you got it, what do you do with it now that it's in front of you? Is that a good conversation topic for today,
Yeah,
you
I think
think?
it's great. Yeah, a lot to
Yeah.
a lot to talk about there for sure.
So I think one of the reasons that I've always kind of said that's not a thing, that's not a problem, is that many, if not most MSP owners will say with some frequency and very consistently across the industry, I'm really good at sales. And I say, great. What does that mean? These are the verbatim words, heard them hundreds of times. You put me in front of somebody and I'm going to close. And I'm like, well, a big deal. That's always the case, is it not? Well, it turns out it's not always the case, right? So that's, I think, where I got my big blind spot is that enough people tell me if you put me in front of somebody, I'm going to earn the business. I kind of took that more universally than I should have. But let me ask you, when you were in your MSP world, you were one of those guys. We put you in front of somebody, you're going to close the deal. Is that
Sure.
probably true?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Oh, you know, I think the majority of the time I was confusing what a sale was with an order.
Mm,
I think the reality was things got so teed up for me through a strong referral. Um, someone quitting one company and starting another company, and I would, just be there to be able to like, take on more business. Of course, I was selling myself through the whole, post, the past experience with them and those kind of things, or, the referral, would come over nicely. And, so I was just kind of sitting there, just being me and being available. And they really had that need. So a lot of the sales were really just orders. There wasn't much to do as far as the sales. So a lot of, and I can say that definitively, like a lot of the sales that I did were were just teed up. They were not hard.
Sure. And there's and I think you're probably right. Maybe they weren't hard. They compared to you cold called them, had to get to that moment where they'll actually meet with you. Yeah, totally different, much harder. How would you have done in that? I don't know. Did you play in that world at any point with your MSP?
A little bit. There's definitely some, more cold ways of getting clients, whether they called us or we reached out to them, but no relationship and those kind of things. Um, and that personally stretched me. What one thing that I realized going through this process, watching other salespeople, and how difficult the job looks to them versus, principal led sales like I was able to do. Um, which I think is like a superpower that guys that or girls that want to do this, right? They want to actually stand in front of customers and kind of go through the sales process. It's like if you can have the conviction of what you're selling, um, it makes all the difference in the world. And really how you develop that conviction is one, are you actually doing, do you understand your business well enough to define what you actually do, how you get that done, what you're actually trying to solve for the client? I think that's my conviction was always so high because I was actually doing a lot of the technical work for so long that I really knew what we were selling, what we were doing, right? So that was one. The other thing that helped with the sale, and we talked about this in past podcasts, was I knew what I was actually selling, right? Like I knew the price of it, why it was priced that way, how it made sense for the customer. The customer was rarely dictating what they needed outside of like what we actually had to offer, right? Like if a client or a prospect came to us and said, "Hey, we want this specialized thing and we want a guy on site all the time." It's like I could easily just turn that into what we did versus what they wanted because my conviction was so high of like what we knew actually worked and what we would actually deliver. I think a lot of MSPs out there get confused on what their offer is and they want to conform to what the client actually wants or the prospect actually wants. And then the sales kind of fall apart from there because they don't really know how to position themselves because everything kind of is different each time. I think that's
Yeah.
another thing that I personally did, where it's just like, here's how we do it. Take it or leave it, more or less.
Yeah. That the notion of knowing what it is you sell, I think that's a really hard thing for folks to hear. If we just picked an MSP out the street who's doing well enough and we said, "What do you sell?" Right? They're going to tell us about their managed services offering. They're going to tell us about, their security offering, and and they'll sound really great, and they'll mean it, and they're right. Once we start putting some scenarios in front of them of uniqueness to a particular client, I think you'd have to go through that exercise for them to say, "Oh shit, I don't really know what we sell," or I'm feeling so uncomfortable that it's clear that I don't know what I'm selling here. Now, the owner usually has enough charisma and experience to kind of weave through that moment successfully. But when we start thinking about having a salesperson who isn't the founder, who doesn't know all the things, boy, that makes it really hard. And I definitely have heard that from more than one salesperson. It's like, I don't even know what we sell here. It's changing all the time. I'm lost when I'm trying to have a conversation. I have to bring the owner with me on every meeting because he knows how to explain it better. And then he's frustrated with me that I can't do it on my own. Like when you start hearing those words or that feedback, there's your clue that you're not certain of what you're selling. Okay. When we get into kind of the process of, okay, we're here, they have enough curiosity about what we do, or they have a need if they're an internal client well enough. there's an order of selling that with this particular client that I was talking with, it was like, "Oh, the order of selling it doesn't even occur to you." It probably took us 10 or 15 minutes of me trying to tease it out of him before he found the words that approximated the order of selling. And to me, it's like, man, you got to have that on lock. Like that has to be as part of a memory item that's just going through your mind as you're walking in the door. And that order of selling is really focused on, and it's going to sound so simple. Got to sell yourself first, company second, goods and services last. That's the order of selling. Anything less than that, and you're lost. You're absolutely lost. And that's when you start getting into that race to the bottom on pricing, talking about features and benefits. It's game over, right? So when you hear me say you got to sell yourself first, and I know this is like my specialty, I know all my words. I know you'll do great, but what do you kind of hear when you say selling yourself first?
Yeah. You know, you need to come with a bit of credibility, right? You need to be able to explain, who you are, what you stand for. If you're talking about your company, what your, what really is your mission out there, right? You know, and this is where I think a lot of people get hung up is because the client, the prospect may not be ready for that conversation. Right? They want it. They want to know that they're about to hand over the keys to all their passwords and all their buildings to someone that they don't understand what they do. So there's that, trust factor that all MSPs generally earn, maybe too early at times, but they have to earn that. So being a human, being able to talk to them without technical jargon, you know, trying to relate to them, help them understand that you've helped other businesses like theirs. That's really kind of, I think, where that human kind of like selling yourself comes out the best. But yeah, it's tough because they want to fast forward to how much does it cost? What can you do? Do you know how to fix this? What about this scenario? Um,
When you
yeah,
say
so
they want to fast forward, who's they in your in that?
I think both.
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
client wants to fast forward and get to the point, and I think the salesperson also wants to get through that messiness and get to, that point as well. And I think it depends too. Maybe they're more comfortable talking about technical stuff. Maybe they're not comfortable talking about that. So,
Yeah. And there's the rub right there. It's who's trying to fast forward. And I think you're right. I think the prospect initially wants to fast forward to it. The salesperson or the owner the principal led salesperson likely wants to as well because it's way more comfortable than that meaningful rapport building. But if we believe that we have to sell ourselves first and that you are most likely to be the one that wants to fast forward, then right there you have your exact moment that you need to take the leadership position. You use the word conviction a lot, Gary, and this is one of those areas where you have to have so much conviction in your process and what you stand for to say, I can't do business with you until I know you. It's
yeah.
just not possible.
Yep.
There's no version where I'm going to do anything meaningful with you if I don't understand you and your business. And here's kind of the party trick to this. You never have to tell them anything about yourself.
Totally.
It's like something like Queen Elizabeth or somebody made this great comment like, it's a great feeling when you sit next to a stranger at a party and you walk away from that party saying, wow, that person found me very interesting. Like, it's a great feeling. But an even better feeling, she said, is knowing that that person's walking away saying, wow, that they found me very interesting. Do you understand the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah.
Like,
No,
who
yeah, I know the
cares what
quote.
you feel? How do they feel?
Yes.
And that meaningful rapport building is built around that. Who are you? What do you do? How do you do it? Why do you do it that way? Let's envision just for a moment. We won't pantomime the whole damn thing, but you know, CFOs are oftentimes the decision makers, or at least the gateway to the decision maker on the IT spend. Is there a more boring job than a CFO to most people? Absolutely. Does the CFO get to go home and talk to his kids about all the superhero shit of being a CFO and that he went to some, goofy college in Indiana? No, no one gives a shit. No one cares, right? But you care. And you have that opportunity to make them feel great. Hey, Bob, awesome to meet you. I'm so excited to meet a CFO. I know what CFO stands for, but what is a CFO? Help me understand. That guy gets to talk about himself.
Yes.
How'd you become a CFO? Why'd you choose to become a CFO? You're not wasting his time because everyone loves talking about themselves when asked with genuine curiosity. So you're selling yourself through that curiosity you have about that person. And please don't ask them about the fish hanging on the wall or the golf balls or, what courses you play. That's what I put in the category of um, less meaningful rapport building. You want to lead them to a business conversation. They are a business person. Show that curiosity there. So that order of selling, that's massive, and you don't have to go in there and just talk about yourself uninterrupted. I keep having the same sales call with. It was about 2 years ago. I kept having the same sales call with this guy, and he's a really nice guy. I liked it. I'm trying to sell him something, right? And he's ostensibly trying to buy something. Every single conversation we had, and this went on for months, about once every other week, we'd get on that call and he would talk uninterrupted for 27 minutes. And it's like, wow, this is crazy. I wonder what he's like on a sales call where he's trying to sell someone, because he has zero curiosity about what we're trying to discover together. How much curiosity does he have in the person that he's trying to sell a $2,500 a month managed services contract? But I think people envision that type of sale, that person as a salesperson, where it's like they've got the gift for gab. They can just
Sure.
talk forever. That's not what we mean. So that's not what I want you to envision. I want you to envision in that selling yourself piece as showing massive curiosity in a meaningful way. And that just naturally follows into the selling the company, asking about their company, you dropping a few hints. We're waiting for that ball to be thrown back to us. Well, tell me more about your company. Tell me more about what you guys do. Okay. If that's the first thing they ask, so tell me about you, tell me about your company, Josh. Happy to. We've been around for about 15 years. We work with this kind of client. Let me ask you, throw that ball back and get them going. Don't take that bait to find yourself rambling for 15 minutes about yourself or your company. Give them 2 quick hammers, then go back. So anyway, I feel like I'm trying to teach a class. I don't want to do that. But this is so important, especially to this particular client that I'm working with. They're rushing straight to, we have one call with them, and then we send them a quote. Okay, that's what they find themselves doing. I don't think they had any, like, intention of saying, "How efficient can we be? We got all the information we need. We've mastered this." It's more like, this is where we found ourselves. We have a really long, big first conversation, and then we go back, put together a quote, and fire it over to them.
Let me
You ever
let me
found
ask you,
yourself in
like,
that? Yeah.
where do you think, like, yeah, I found myself doing that often, where it's like, oh, okay, they seem super interested. Like, we talked a little bit about like how we can do services. They were super nice. They seemed to like me. Um, Man, it just seems like I should just send them a quote and get this thing rolling. What what's the problem of doing that?
Yeah. It's a massive problem, and it really it really comes down to that client is willing to go fast because ultimately right now all they want is one thing from you. And they want a quote. They want that. That's all they want. And once you give it to them, then what happens? You're chasing after them. You didn't establish enough rapport for them to have earned a proposal or quote, and you didn't earn enough equity with them for them to respect what you're trying to do for them. So every once in a while, and this is the hard part, it's like a slot machine pull. It's one time you hit it and you won $500. One time you sent the quote and got it signed and everything went fine, and you treat that as your truth. When really the truth is, if you look back at all the times you sent those quotes, you probably had less than a 10% close ratio on those. Maybe you had 15, but most often than not, you had to go chase them around and wonder. And that's the most common thing I hear. So the problem is you didn't earn any sort of equity with one another, and they just got what they want. I could do a really great analogy about, what men want and the experience of women in this same scenario. They want the one thing, and you didn't earn it, right? So that analogy can go on a while, but I won't do that. The the solve for that is to the faster your client wants to go or your prospect wants to go, the slower you go. It's like a pendulum. So if we can say, if this client in particular, and this is what we've started the journey with them is, okay, let's not do that anymore. Let's instead of sending them that quote, let's promise ourselves that we're going to set the next meeting date where we can come back and learn a little bit more and offer some solutions that we can trial close with them. So we got to have an answer for don't just go meet them and send them a quote. You're not being efficient. It's not working. It's not the right move. Slow it down a little bit. And there's a few gotchas in there. One of them is that phrase sending a quote. Right? That's a no-go. We erase that from their minds immediately. Hey, we deliver proposals. We don't send quotes. Right? We agreed that this is what's going to happen next. We agreed on a price and a start date. Now that proposal is just a memorialization of that. So again, I hate this because I feel like I'm just, lecturing and I don't want to do that. I want to have a conversation, but that's where these folks were. These folks were moving too fast. They weren't getting to know the client where they weren't establishing that sell yourself first, company second, goods and services last. That was they solved that and they're going to have a 50% better increase in closes, I think. They're just kind of
What's the
ruining opportunities.
what's the client doing or the prospect doing with that quote, um, that makes this so dangerous? Are they, is it because they sent the quote or the proposal too early that it blows up the deal, or is there something else involved there?
Yeah, I think it's I think what I'm pretty certain happens is that person is so early in the process that most likely they look at it and say, "Huh, all right, good to know. Good to know. I just got to dodge this knucklehead for a couple weeks and I'll be taking this more serious down the road." I think that's the most common, especially when we've prospected to them. The second thing that is likely to happen is they're trying to turn this very serious purchase of IT services into a commodity, and they're just gathering as many quotes as they can, and they'll make some decision based on something other than what you want them to make that decision on. I think those are the 2 most likely outcomes.
So we haven't confirmed whether or not they were ready for a decision, regardless if it was our quote or someone else's.
That's right. That's
Yeah, and
right.
I do that all the time to people. I
Yeah.
mean, especially if I get cold called, it's like, "Oh, yeah, send me a proposal." And it's like,
Yeah,
you
I'm
get you
curious.
get that thing and it's like, "Okay, cool." And I had no reason to say yes or no. I wasn't shopping and, so yeah, especially if you're reaching out to people, proactively to try to, get new business. Yeah, that seems
Yeah.
very dangerous.
It is dangerous. So dangerous, in fact, that when I'm searching for a service, if that salesperson isn't following a process that approximates how I like to sell, I find myself doing their job for them. Because what I also know is, hey, if you're willing to just send me a quote, how hard is it going to be for me to chase you later when I want to follow up and get more questions and learn more? I'm sketched out by that. I, Countless times I've said, all right, cool, send me the quote, but let's get on each other's calendars so we can talk again because I'm sure I'm going to have questions. Like, why am I doing that salesperson's job for them? That's what they need to do, which brings us into the next big point, which is we're not sending that first appointment is not a first appointment until you've done 3 things, 4 if you wanna be a real master, okay? We're not sending a proposal, we're not delivering a proposal, we're not sending a quote, whatever you wanna say, until we've established their budget, their time frame, the next meeting date, and if you want to be super high speed, low drag, that referral request. Now, how crazy does that referral request sound to you, Gary?
Define what that is for the audience
Do you
and
know
myself.
anyone else who could use our services?
Man, that sounds scary to ask for.
It does. It feels very weird. When do you think most MSPs potentially, maybe, might kind of sort of ask for that?
When they're desperate.
When they're desperate, or when the project's done, or when the deal is
Yeah,
closed and
yeah, well, I
they're
mean, when
onboarded,
yeah, way long after. Yeah, if ever, right.
right? So if we're selling ourselves first, how do we know when we've closed the deal on selling ourselves? At the end of that first meeting, if they like you, if they trust you, if you've done your job of selling yourself, it should feel much less scary to say, "Hey, by the way, we're trying to grow this thing. We're all over this area, and I think we're doing well. But who do you know that could use services like ours?" Boy, that shouldn't. If that feels scary, well, go back to step one. You didn't sell yourself. If it feels natural, you've probably done a really good job of selling yourself. But getting those top 3 of, budget, time frame, next step, and referring back to the client we're working on with this, first time that their prospect sees the price is when they open up that PDF and they say, "That looks right. That's too much. Oh, wow, I didn't know it'd be like that." That that's that's shocking to me, right?
Help everyone
Shocking.
understand what the setting the budget conversation could look like in a way that's successful. So many times I've asked, like, hey, do you have a budget established? The knee jerk reaction for prospects is like, well, I'm not going to tell you that. Then you'll know how much you need to charge me. So what does that dance look like in a real world scenario where it's an honest
This
conversation?
dance, it is the easiest dance in the world. The one thing that will 100% not work is asking what their budget is. Like, that's it. Like, that's just not going to work. You might get that lottery pull, but it's not going to work. You've got to start meshing together that order of selling and those requirements, and you start, double dutying those. So as I get to know this CFO, for example, I'm going to get him talking about his past. And I'm going to say something like, "Okay, I understand what you do. That makes a lot of sense. Help me out with this." Most of my prospects and clients have never even considered budgeting for IT services. How did you do it at that last job? There was so much going on in that right there. I'm talking about the past. I'm flattering him against a false negative. I'm letting him talk about what he's done in the past. So it's safe. I can't sell you there. I went negative on people that don't establish budgets. So, of course, you're going to tell me you've established budgets. So tell me what you did at the last job. Oh, we did 1.5, 2% of our total, this or that. Or, you know what? The last place, they didn't want to talk about budgets. They never budgeted. It was terrible. Well, I've got responses for that. Now, last place didn't do it. Well, oh man, well, that's got to be nice. Here, you're certainly budgeting for that, I'm sure. We're trying to figure it out. Now I've opened the door that I can walk through. Okay? Or I can say, I've heard a number. Tell me what you think of this. Most companies are spending, 1 to 1.7% of their total revenue on IT. Does that hold water? Gartner said that, 3 years ago. Do you think that still holds water? You can start having the conversation real easily. Now, that works. It's a practice, it's a skill, it's something that you need to kind of feel the words coming out of your mouth, hear various replies to feel comfortable with it. My personal method, and if you've ever been a prospect of Bering McKinley, you know this is true. Within the first 30 seconds, I know your company revenue and I know if you're profitable. I'm very forward with it because, and I think MSPs more so today than ever should be doing the same thing. I meet the prospect. Oh, okay, yeah, you guys, MSP, you do this. That's awesome. How many folks are you? Oh, you're 10 people. What are you guys doing? About two and a half? Hey, they're gonna say, "Oh man, that's exactly what we were." Oh, we haven't quite cracked the 1.5 yet, or you know what, we killed it. We're 3.5. Now I've established authority in that moment. I've established that this is the kind of conversation we're going to have. We're not going to talk immediately about whether your tech's earning your time or your ConnectWise is connected to your QuickBooks. We're going to escalate way high and we're going to be grown-ups and we're going to talk about what really matters, revenue and profit.
We'll be right back with more, but first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
An
Yeah.
MSP, if you haven't done that for the last 20 years, good on you. Good for you. The MSP services have likely always been an expense item. But if you're not seeing the trend that your services are going to convert and what you're going to need to be doing is going to be more of an ROI conversation, which means you really have to understand how they think about money and how they think about IT spend. Start practicing getting bold and estimating revenue and having that conversation in the first few minutes. You want to sell yourself, add a little value just in that conversation and that you guys becoming peers instead of vendor and client.
Well, yeah, I think, when when you ask me how you sell yourself, like one thing that came to mind was the credibility factor and finding ways to introduce that. And it is like a parlor trick, right? It's like you can kind of deduce how much money they're making based on the size of their business, right? And by the way, you can also go out and there's plenty of services that will give you an estimate of how much these companies are making. And if you're not spending 5 to 10 minutes just looking at that data before you go and talk to a customer, you're missing out. Like there's good data out there. And even if you're wrong, you're gonna be close
You're
directionally.
going to be
So
close, and especially if you go look what their revenue might be, then do another 2 or 3 minutes of saying, "What are the industry benchmarks and standards for this type of company, and, what relationship to, head count versus building size versus trees in the parking lot?" Like, find out what the metric is, and you're gonna establish a little more credibility with them as well. So that's huge. So that dance of getting budget is really, really as straightforward as you're willing to make it. Okay. I'm not going to answer some kid's question of what's my budget for whatever. You got to earn that a little bit and you can earn it easily, but I want to know why you're asking. If it's left to your prospect to wonder why you're asking, they're always going to come to the same conclusion. Well, you're going to, charge me the most I can up to my budget and maybe even push me over. If that's the response you're getting, well, it's because you haven't sold yourself yet. You haven't established that with them. So why not start from the jump saying we're going to have this kind of conversation?
yeah, I think that's where the magic is, right? So every time I'm asked, well, what's your budget? It's coming from, well, not every time. Let me just say the times that it's a turnoff as a buyer, you can just feel it's coming from how much can I charge you? Are you willing to pay whatever we're going to charge you? And it's an honest question, right? It's like, they kind of need to know, their boss or someone's telling them like, hey, don't waste your time.
All right.
Like,
All
establish
right.
that budget. So the same mechanism where, you're getting to that end point of like, does this even make sense? But how you're doing the math to get there, not just asking them, will you pay me? But actually, can you actually afford it? Do you understand the value that I'm bringing? Those are the answers you're getting with that budget question. simply just saying we spend $5,000 a month on IT. Can you do that for me, MSP? Um, that's not even really what you want.
No, it is such an amazing thing to hear MSPs, and I usually hear it from really large MSPs where it's really valid, or I hear this thing from, a more modest size MSP that is completely invalid, where to use your order taking versus selling, they're like, "Oh, they only spend $1,000 a month. We're not doing business with them." Or they only have 5 users and we're not doing business with them. Okay. Meaning you're not gonna take an order from them. You're not McDonald's. If you don't have at least $1.39, you ain't buying a cheeseburger. Case closed. But you're here to sell. So if you know they've got a really small budget, but they're willing to have some interesting conversations with you, and you can earn that credibility with them, you might be the piece that says, "Yeah, I know you've only been spending $1,300 a month. I'm telling you, this is what happens when you come off that dusty old wallet a little bit and spend 2,500. Whatever things you need to tell them about risk mitigation or accessibility or downtime, that's where you start justifying that. But just starting with they're too small, they're not spending enough, I'm not going to bother, man, that's a losing proposition because you're here to sell, right? Not
What do
just
you
take the order.
What do you think about this idea? I follow Alex Hormozy online,
Oh,
and I'm not sure if I like him or not, but he's
yeah.
got some he's got some good takes, and
Hell yeah.
he presented this idea today that I thought was very interesting. I wonder if you would agree with it or not. Um, but he said, close ratio is relative to price, and the higher your close ratio, he's saying, like, if you're closing 80% and above, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like you're priced 5x to 6x below where you should be. Do
Yeah,
you
that's
understand this relationship?
yeah, this is he's taken a fun spin on an old saying, which is how
Yeah.
do you know when your prices are too low? When
Hmm.
everyone says yes.
Right.
Right? So yeah, no, absolutely. If everyone's saying yes, 73.6% close ratio, whatever the number he made up, he's exactly right. Press on
What
your pricing.
in We talked about pricing the last time, but I think it's valid here, right? So when we're working with our MSP clients, or what we're seeing out there, how much of how much of their close happens because they take a hit on price? Like, is that a relationship that we're seeing where maybe they're struggling to get deals, but of the deals that they get, are they pricing themselves incorrectly to drive up that close ratio, which would then obviously cause the gross profit to go lower? And
Yeah, we'd have to get some industrial psychologists in here and human behavior experts to do this justice. But the answer is yes, but it's not even because their prospect is demanding it. The price doesn't get wrong because you said 150 a user and they said 125 and you said, "Okay." You lost the battle before you went in the room. You made a value decision based on your values and what you perceive their values to be, and where you needed to be 150 before they even asked, you said 95 because you're scared, you didn't want to lose the deal, you wanted to ensure you got the deal. You shot yourself in the foot. You priced yourself too low before you even, stepped into the room.
so
Am I
what is
answering your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, yeah, you are. And so let's marry that up with kind of what we were talking about before, which is getting them the proposal too early, or the quote too early. Um when we're delaying this process more, right? We're setting that first appointment, we're talking to them about their business, and we're getting the most out of them. We're selling ourselves, we set that next appointment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we
Yeah,
need more time to develop what this pricing mechanism is? Do we need more time to understand kind of what their budget is at that point? Does that affect our price? How does that relationship go?
so I'm gonna say this, and it's a dangerous thing to say, but you probably know what the price should be, by the time you're done with that first meeting. You could probably realistically, for a managed service agreement, you could probably name the price in your head. That's what ends up on the proposal, and that's what you get. You don't need more time, okay, for that. Maybe on the project, you're probably also right. You thought this is $100,000 project, this is a $50,000 project. Probably right. You didn't need much more discovery. It's the theater of the process. It's the theater of sales that's so important. Hey, this is a big deal. Hey, you went on that first date, you think you fell in love, she thinks she fell in love, and you say, I'm going to marry that girl. You were right, but you're not a total idiot. You didn't buy an engagement ring the next day and say, I might as well just propose to you right now. It's the theater of establishing and confirming what you knew on that first moment. And, when you tell your grandkids 50 years later that you knew you were going to marry her, it's a great story. But it's that theater of saying, let's really get to know each other. Let's make sure that these feelings are real. Because for every person you fell in love with, you were wrong 99% of the time. Okay. So we got to go through that process of saying, I'm going to show you how serious I take this and how serious you should take this by going through the steps properly. And that second meeting, that true discovery, that trial close, it's necessary for the human psychology of it, for the relationship building piece of it, as much as it is legitimately for the how many doggone computers do you have? How tore up is your network? What aren't you doing? That's all critical as well. But that second meeting, even if you had perfect information, you knew it all, I still need that second meeting. And somebody's going to listen to this and say, you're just giving the client more opportunity to say no. You're delaying the process. You're making it frustrating for the client. Yeah, it's frustrating if I didn't establish what the process was as a leader in that room on day one. This is our process. This is how we do it. This is what we have found works best for the best outcomes. Are you
And are you
interested in coming along on that?
Yeah, are you defining that? Like, how help everyone understand, like, the mechanics around this. Like, are you walking them through what this kind of, multi-step process is gonna look like?
Yeah.
Is that a good thing to do?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. And I have to for just because it is good business to say, this is what happens from here. Because at some point, if it's even a remotely serious prospect, they're going to ask you, okay, well, what's next? Right? You got to be ready to say, here's what's next. And remember on that kind of those things I need, budget, time frame, next meeting date. Well, I'm getting that time frame in there so I can adapt for them. If they're saying, yeah, we're interested in changing providers, we hate our guy, we love our guy, but we have to change whatever they're telling you, you've got to stay in that fight and say, okay, great. Let's take a moment on that. When are you looking to make that change? Okay. And as much as Gary Pica drives me nuts, he's had some great words of wisdom in there. He really taught this piece of establish that time frame. Once you start establishing that time frame, we're not going to just sit there and believe it. We're going to ask the client to go be very dramatic about this. All right, so you're going to have a new provider by that date. What I want you to do right now for me is just take a moment, close your eyes if you want. But I want you to imagine what it looks like to tell that provider that they're not going to be the provider. Are you really convicted that whatever problems you're having, you're willing to change? And what will that look like to tell them? You only get to do that if you have established a great, emotional connection with that buyer. And you can get there, and the expectation is you will get there. Okay. But that I have that time frame of when you want to go live. And now we're going to work backwards to say, okay, in order to do that, we got to have signed paper by about 2 weeks before that. And before we can put paper in your hands, we have to do this next meeting where we do a discovery. So why don't you grab your calendar and let's schedule that discovery meeting? Who else needs to be in it? I've got my calendar up. All right, great. We're locked in. Then from there, we're going to schedule the proposal delivery, which will be on that day. And by the time we get there, our expectation is we'll have already agreed on a price. We've already agreed on what it's going to include and not include. And when we deliver that proposal, you should be locked in and ready to go. And then we revisit that after the second meeting as well.
I'd
Yeah, walk
imagine a
them
lot
through it.
of MSPs are sitting here saying, "Oh, Josh, I mean, what this isn't new knowledge. Like, of course, we meet with them and then we have to go into their network and like figure out what's
Yes.
going on. Otherwise, we don't know what we're quoting. And then, yeah, of
Yes.
course, that's going to take some time and then we're going to deliver them a proposal." So, like, what is the main thing that you're trying to convey to them as far as like if they feel like one, they're not winning every deal they feel like they should be winning. They're sticking to their price, so they're pricing things right for their benefit. They're not winning as many deals. It's not always because of price. They're going through a three-step process. What's lacking? Like, what's the key insight that you can provide to them that's saying like, "Hey, slow it down here, speed it up there, don't deliver this too early." What's like the key thing that you think
I
or that you see
think
out there?
I think you're right. Many, if not most, MSPs should be saying, "Well, I am doing that 3 steps. I'm doing those things Gary just described." What's missing is those little pieces in there of, did you really establish budget? Did you really set the next meeting date? Did you really establish when you're going to go live? Hey, if I say everyone wants a quote, then the next thing they want is a free discovery. Tell us what's
Mm.
wrong with everything. Okay. They may not even have nefarious, feelings about it. They'll agree to that. Hey, when you look at your deals that didn't go the way that you thought they should, where did you lose them? You likely lost them once you put the paper in their hands, once you emailed it to them. That's when, and what you didn't do was say, here's when we're going to make a decision, yes or no. Do you agree that that's the day we're going to make a decision? You didn't do that little piece in there. Again, if you're doing it, great. I commend you. But if you're not winning all the deals that you think you should be, it's those little pieces in between the big things that you're doing right. Hey, there's nuance in there.
So is this really a four-part step then? First time appointment, discovery, proposal, in person, hopefully, and then a follow-up meeting after?
So I really kind of think about it of like, there's 3 pillars.
Okay.
Okay. The pillars are first meeting, FTA, discovery, closing meeting. Those are your pillars.
Okay.
You might have a couple meetings in between there. You might have to circle back and do a few things in there, but those are your 3 pillars. The discovery, I could argue that the really good sales that we see where they do it consistently, there is that fourth meeting. There is that in at post discovery pre proposal. And that's usually project like heavy projects or really complex opportunities. We're saying before we go through all of the work of, building a full out proposal, I'm going to come back with a 1-page solution. Okay. So, hey, we did the discovery's happening on this date. 4 days later, we're going to come back and we're going to just present some solutions to you. Good, better, best, cheapest, fine, and most expensive, whatever makes sense for your case. Now we're getting that true trial close. All right. So option B looked the best, meets your budget. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You still want to go live on the first? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then when we come back on the fifth, is there anything that would prevent you from signing? Put it out there. That's a gift that you've given yourself because they're either going to object now or they're going to object later, and you ain't going to be there when they start objecting. They're gonna look at it and say, I don't know. I don't like that," or "How about that?" or "Let's get one more bid." You gotta lock that stuff in right on that solution delivery.
Yeah, so best case scenario is when you give the proposal, you're expecting a close on that meeting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that's why emailing it just has no value. You're asking them for them to not reply.
You
They
are
don't have to.
demanding they don't reply. Yeah, for
Demanding,
sure.
okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
and I and
mean,
I'll
yeah.
I'll personalize this a little bit. So every sale that Barry McKinley does is remote. Our clients are all over the world, right? So I never get the benefit of actually going face to face and walking this through. So I have to really tighten my sales process. So number one, that first meeting, I'm knowing your budget, I'm knowing your time frame, I'm getting as much as I can. I'm really trying to, I almost over deliver value And I say that in a negative way, not a positive way. It's too much. But we always have our next meeting date, period, point blank. Then and oftentimes for us that is our closing meeting because we're going to have some stuff in between that happens. But the part where I think we mess up is eventually I send them the proposal. And then I'm waiting, but I've locked them down to say, yes, I'll have this back to you by 3 o'clock. Yes, I'll have that to you by Friday. Hey, that happens 50% of the time. I'm waiting. I'm having to chase every now and again, and I hate it. What I keep promising myself is on that next one that I do, I'm going to say, great, here's everything you need to know. When we come back on Thursday, we're going to do the go, no go meeting. And if you're saying yes, I'm going to send you the link while we're on the phone and you're going to sign it while we're on the phone. That's the piece that I need to develop further for myself, just to be kind of transparent about the fact that this is hard, right? This is not intuitive or something you stumble across the right formula. And again, if you're killing deals and you're awesome and you do it some way different, you're awesome and I love you for it. But if you're that $2 million MSP and you're not closing enough deals and you're wondering why, I think there's some solution in here for you. And you got to challenge what's comfortable for you and try to put some spins on it.
So when we have people listening are probably like, yeah, that sounds great. But I only get to give 4 or 5 of these proposals out a year. I don't have enough business coming in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is not my problem. What do you say to that?
Not my problem. How? What do you
So
mean?
my problem is, I close 50% of the deals that I get because, they're referrals and it's easy and I'm not
Yeah.
following that process, but it makes a ton of sense and I want to do that, but I don't get enough at bats. So my problem is at bats. I need more people coming in.
A, you're right. B, let's go from 50% to 100%. If you're only getting 4 good ones or 8 good ones a year, why not do some twists to how you're performing today and increase that close ratio? Now, for me, my close ratio is exceedingly high because I'm counting that proposal from the moment we have our first appointment through a yes or a no. And I have a very high close ratio because I'm not letting things progress to the next step unless I'm positive. Okay, so wherever you start thinking about your close ratio, make sure you're doing it in a really thoughtful manner. But if you're only getting a few and they're coming from referrals and pretty warm sources, you should be at 100%. You should be at 75%. And if you're not, you should know why you didn't get it and that it didn't include anything you could have modified here. Okay. Because, what's the old saying? Buyers are liars. Okay. And it's probably true, but they're lying to themselves as much as they're lying to you, and they're lying to you unintentionally. But they think they have authorization. They think they want to do this thing. You did everything perfect and you didn't get it because they lied about something up front. Again, I'm not saying that in a really negative way, but they misrepresented something and that's why you didn't get the deal. But if you followed all your steps, that close ratio is going to go through the roof. And that's
Makes sense.
a great kind of number to pull there, Gary. When I talk to, the 1.5, $2 million MSP, I say, how many first appointments did you go on last year? And they're counting it like this, right? That in itself can be really terrifying. That's going to really, you would think that by having so few, you would do things picture perfect. But what it turns out is you're going to do what feels safest when you have so few. And that feels safe means it feels safe to you, which means you're not stretching yourself into that leadership role in the sales process. You're not asking the tougher questions and you're just kind of hurting your probability. When in fact, with that few first time appointments, you've got to understand that sales is a science unto itself and that there has been decades, if not a millennia, of development to how a professional salesperson operates. And we want to emulate that as close as possible.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. And let's take it back to our client. you know, they're falling into all the traps. And I call them traps because they are traps. It felt right to send him the quote. It felt right to send the quote right after the first meeting. If everything just felt right. And once you shine a light on it and you really start thinking about it, this person was like, he was, had the head slam. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. Like that was their reaction. They were very receptive to why do we have this problem? And we stumbled across the problem very innocently. We weren't even talking about sales in the meeting preceding this sales call. It was very much um, it was an upsell thing that they're doing where they're trying to get their clients upsold into something new that they have. And they're like, yeah, okay, I sent him a quote. I sent him a quote. I sent him a quote. I was like, hold on, what do you mean you sent him a quote? You're talking about $1,000 a month, right? And that's what triggered us into the conversation. Yeah, I could ramble on this all day, Gary. Yeah.
Yeah, it's making me think about what I have told a few of our clients recently.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, some people just struggle to kind of you get comfortable in these contracts, right? It's like, they're spending, 7 grand a month, and yeah, it seems like a lot of money, and it really probably is. And you've kind of included everything, and you feel like they need to do things, but you've kind of included things, and you're not really sure where that line is. How do I introduce something new? How do I know they're not going to say no, or why is that not included? Um, so it's like, yeah, I was just kind of thinking about like the conundrum that we get ourselves into. Um, and then also just the reality of like, when you do have a large enough client base, how much business is still in there that you haven't actually gotten?
Yeah, that's a scary question to start asking yourself is there more in there? Well, in 2026, I guarantee you there's more in there. Is depending on what you're able to stretch yourself and your team to do for sure. At even the table stakes, there's plenty more in there. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's the episode, gang. Let's leave it at this. I'm just seeing a quote from the client that we're talking about. And the quote was, and I love this, I think we do a good job with the first meeting. Except for we don't schedule the next meeting. Like, so I had kind of done whatever rant I'd done to this poor guy and all the things about the first meeting. He said, "Yeah, I think we do a really good job on that. We don't schedule the first meeting, but I think we do a really good job." I think that's how it was delivered. And it's like, oh man. So if you're out there and you're thinking about your own sales process, there's A's and F's, right? Did I get the budget? Did I get the time frame? Did I get the next meeting? Great, you got an A. You didn't get one of those, you got an F. All right. And it's real hard to not take this personal or not get defensive about it, but grow up. It's something that we always all need to get better at. I shared with you where I need to get better at it. So leave a comment, give us a call. I love hearing your stories. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell us where we're wrong. I'll listen. I'll read the comments. But until then, thanks for joining. We'll catch you next time.